We wouldn't be here if we had anywhere else to go. My mother's voice cracked on the word anywhere, and she wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. She stood on my front porch in a coat I'd last seen her wear to my college. Graduation 12 years earlier, the wool worn thin at the elbows, holding a single suitcase that looked like it had survived. More bus stations than I could count. My father stood half a step behind her, hands shoved deep into his pockets, staring at the doormat like it held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. 6 years earlier, I had stood on their porch with 2 suitcases and a sleeping bag, 26 years old and completely broke, and my mother had laughed. Not a gentle laugh, not a sympathetic one, a sharp, bitter sound that I can still hear perfectly if I close my eyes. "I told you," she'd said, leaning against their doorframe with her arms crossed. "I told you chasing dreams doesn't pay the rent." Now standing in the doorway of a home I'd bought with money, I'd earned after they'd turned me away, I felt something I'd been preparing for 6 years finally arrive. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a quiet, careful question. What do I owe the people who taught me I was only worth what I could prove? My name is Natalie Voss, and 6 years ago my parents told me I'd made my bed, and I could lie in it. What they didn't know then, and what I was about to make them understand, was that I'd built an entirely different bed than the one they'd imagined for me, and I'd done it without a single dollar of their approval. Welcome back to Revenge Camera Stories, where the truth gets documented and quiet people stop accepting cruelty disguised as tough love. We tell stories about people who rebuilt their lives after being abandoned, who succeeded without permission, and who learned that boundaries aren't the same as bitterness. Before I tell you what my mother said when I asked why they'd come, 3 things. First, hit like and subscribe. These stories reach people who've been told they'd fail, and your support helps them find these words when they need them most. Second, drop your city, local time, and tell me, have you ever been rejected by family during your hardest moment? Just yes or no. I read every single one. Third, if you've ever rebuilt your life after someone laughed at your failure, drop a emoji. You're why I keep telling these stories. I'm in Austin, Texas, and it's 3 p.m. on a Sunday. That smells like cedar and rain that's still an hour away. Now let me tell you about the 6 years between their laughter and their suitcase. The startup failed on a Thursday in March 6 years ago. Card Connect was supposed to revolutionize how small businesses managed customer loyalty programs. I'd co-founded it with 2 college friends, worked 80-hour weeks for 18 months, lived in a studio apartment with furniture I'd found on Craigslist, and genuinely believed we were building something that mattered. We weren't. Our lead investor pulled funding 2 weeks before our Series A round. By the time I understood what was happening, the company had 11 days of runway left, 4 employees who'd already started job hunting, and a co-founder who'd quietly accepted a position at Google without telling anyone. I was 26 years old. I had $847 in my checking account, $43,000 in student loans, and a lease I couldn't break for another 7 months. I called my parents from a coffee shop because I couldn't afford the internet bill at my apartment anymore. "Mom, I need to come home for a little while." There was a pause. Not the kind where someone's thinking. The kind where someone's deciding how much honesty they're willing to deliver. "What happened to the company?" she asked. "It didn't work out." "Meaning?" "Meaning it's over. We're shutting down." Another pause. "Natalie, you're 26 years old." "I know. Your brother has a house." I wanted to say, "My brother became an accountant like you told him to." "My brother never took a risk you didn't pre-approve. My brother is exactly the person you wanted both of us to be, and I tried to be something else." Instead, I said, "I just need a few months, until I find something steady." My mother sighed. Not sadly, impatiently. "Your father and I talked about this when you started that company." "Talked about what?" "About what we'd do if it fell apart." My chest tightened. And we decided that helping you would be enabling poor decision-making. You made a choice, Natalie. You chose risk over stability. You chose a dream over a plan. Now you need to figure out what that choice cost you." I sat in that coffee shop for 20 minutes after she hung up, staring at a cold latte I couldn't afford to replace, trying to understand how the same woman who'd framed my college acceptance letter had just told me I wasn't worth a couch in the house I'd grown up in. 2 days later, I drove to their house anyway. I told myself she didn't mean it, that when she saw me standing there with everything I owned, maternal instinct would override whatever point she was trying to make. I was wrong. My mother opened the door, saw the suitcases, and actually laughed. "You thought I wasn't serious. Mom, I don't have anywhere else to go." "Then I suggest you find somewhere." My father appeared behind her. I waited for him to intervene. He was the softer one, the one who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me move into my first apartment. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said words I will never forget. Your mother's right. Some people need to hit bottom before they learn to make better choices. I am at bottom. He shook his head. Not yet. You've still got a car. You've still got credit cards. You'll figure it out when you don't have anything left to fall back on. They closed the door. I stood on that porch for 5 full minutes, waiting for it to open again, waiting for someone to say they were kidding. That this was tough love theater designed to teach me a lesson before they let me in. The door stayed closed. I slept in my car that night in a Walmart parking lot, and I made myself a promise. Not a revenge promise, not an I'll show them promise, a survival promise. I would never again let anyone make me feel like my worth had a price tag. Here's what I want to ask you. Have you ever been told by someone you loved that you weren't worth helping? That you'd made your bed? If yes, just drop the word yes in the comments. If you stayed silent then but you're ready to speak now, I need to hear from you. The first 3 months were the hardest. I sold my car for $1,800, which bought me 6 weeks in a monthly rental motel and a used laptop from a pawn shop. I applied for 83 jobs in 47 days. I got 9 interviews and 0 offers. My resume had Founder Card Connect at the top, which hiring managers read as flight risk with an ego. By June, I was working overnight shifts at a 24-hour copy center for $11.50 an hour, eating ramen I cooked in a coffee pot, and applying for every remote contract job I could find on freelance boards. One Tuesday at 2 a.m., while I was formatting someone's 300-page dissertation, I got a message on LinkedIn. Karina Orozco. Saw your Card Connect postmortem blog. Smart analysis. You looking for work? I didn't remember writing a postmortem. Then I did. 3 weeks earlier, unable to sleep, I'd written a brutally honest breakdown of every mistake we'd made overhiring, undervalidating, chasing features instead of revenue, and posted it on Medium expecting maybe 12 people to read it. It had been shared 4,000 times. Karina ran a growth marketing agency in Denver. She needed someone who understood startup metrics, could write, and wasn't afraid to admit when something didn't work. The contract was $3,500 a month. 6-month trial, fully remote. I said yes before she finished the offer. That contract saved my life. Not metaphorically, literally. It got me out of the motel, into a shared apartment with 2 roommates I found on Craigslist, and gave me enough stability to think past the next meal. But more than that, Karina taught me something my parents never had. That failure isn't a character flaw, it's data. Most people learn more from 1 spectacular failure than from 5 mediocre successes. She told me during our first call. You just paid $43,000 in student loans and 18 months of your life for a masterclass in what doesn't work. Now let's figure out what does. For 2 years, I worked for Karina's agency. I learned growth strategy, conversion optimization, customer acquisition modeling, how to read a P&L like a story, and how to build systems that scaled without breaking. I learned that success wasn't about 1 big idea. It was about 1,000 small decisions that compounded over time. And I learned that I was good at this. Not lucky, good. By year 2, I was managing 7 clients and generating $1.2 million in annual revenue for the agency. Karina offered me a partnership stake. I turned it down. Not because I didn't appreciate her, because I'd learned something else during those 2 years. I wasn't afraid of risk anymore. I was afraid of playing small. In January, 4 years after the startup failed, I filed an LLC. Voss Growth Partners. Population me. I took 3 clients from Karina's agency with her blessing, signed 2 new ones within a month, and spent the first 6 months working 90-hour weeks from a 1-bedroom apartment with a standing desk I'd built from IKEA, parts and 2 stacked Amazon boxes. By December of that year, I had 11 clients, 2 contract employees, and $340,000 in annual revenue. The year after that, I hired my first full-time employee, moved into a real office, and crossed $780,000. Last year, we hit $1.4 million with a team of 6. I bought a house in South Austin with a front porch, a garden I'm still learning to maintain, and enough space that I don't feel like I'm holding my breath anymore. I didn't tell my parents any of it. Not because I was hiding, because they'd stopped asking. My brother Ryan called me once a year on my birthday. The conversations were short, polite, and carefully surface level. He'd gotten married. They'd bought a house. Mom and Dad were fine. Everything was fine. I never asked if they knew what I was doing. I assumed they didn't care. I was half right. I need to know. When you succeed after someone abandons you, do you tell them, or do you let the silence speak for itself? Drop tell them or stay silent in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you'd choose. And if you're still here, you're invested. Hit subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. The knock came on a Sunday afternoon in October, 6 years and 7 months after my mother had closed her door on me. I was in my kitchen making coffee when I heard it. 3 soft knocks, hesitant, almost apologetic. I opened the door expecting a neighbor or a delivery I'd forgotten about. Instead, I found my parents. My mother looked older, not just 6 years older, tired older. The kind of aging that comes from stress, not time. Her hair was more gray than I remembered. Her coat was the same one from my college graduation, the wool thin at the elbows. My father stood behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my mother said, "Natalie." "Mom, can we come in?" I didn't move. "Why are you here?" "We need to talk to you about something." "What?" She glanced at my father. He still wouldn't look up. "Can we please come inside?" She asked again, and her voice cracked just slightly on the word please. I stepped aside. They walked into my living room like strangers entering a museum. Careful and uncertain, my mother sat on the edge of the couch. My father remained standing near the door as though he might need to leave quickly. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't offer anything. I sat in the chair across from them and waited. My mother folded her hands in her lap. "Your house is beautiful." "Thank you. Ryan told us you'd done well." "Did he?" She nodded. "He said you run your own company now." "I do." "That's wonderful, Natalie. We're proud of you." The sentence landed like something fragile dropped from a great height. I didn't respond. My father finally spoke. We wouldn't be here if we had anywhere else to go. And there it was. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement, a transaction. "What happened?" I asked. My mother looked at my father. He cleared his throat. The business had some trouble. My parents owned a small printing company in suburban Cleveland. 20 employees, decades-old client relationships. The kind of business that had survived because it never changed. "What kind of trouble?" "We lost our anchor client 2 years ago," my father said. "A packaging company that had been with us for 18 years. They moved production overseas. And we tried to make up the revenue. We took on debt. We bought new equipment thinking we could expand into digital printing. It didn't work." My mother's voice was quieter. "We filed for bankruptcy in July." I sat very still. "We lost the business," she continued. "We lost the house. Your father's retirement account is gone. We've been staying with Ryan and his wife, but..." She trailed off. "But what?" "But they have a baby now. They need the space." And Ryan said... She stopped again. "Ryan said what?" My father finished the sentence. He said maybe it was time we figured things out on our own, that we'd enabled his poor decision-making long enough. The irony was so sharp I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, "What do you need?" My mother's eyes filled. "We need help, Natalie, just for a little while, just until we get back on our feet." "How much?" "We were hoping we could stay here. Maybe a few months. We're both looking for work. We won't be a burden." I looked at my father. "You told me I needed to hit bottom before I'd learn to make better choices. Did you hit bottom yet?" He flinched. "Did losing your business teach you the lesson you thought I needed to learn?" "Natalie," my mother said softly, "we made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose principle over helping your daughter. You chose to teach me a lesson instead of giving me a couch. Now I need to understand. Are you here because you're sorry? Or because you're desperate?" My mother started crying. Not loud, just quiet tears rolling down her face. "Both," she whispered. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, my neighbor was mowing his lawn. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The world kept turning, indifferent to the small, terrible reckonings happening inside people's living rooms. "I slept in my car," I said, not turning around. "For 3 weeks after you closed that door. I sold everything I owned. I ate ramen cooked in a coffee pot for 4 months. I worked overnight shifts at a copy center for $11.50 an hour while applying for jobs during the day." Behind me, my mother made a sound like something breaking. And the whole time, I told myself that when I made it, not if, when I'd come back to your house and show you what I'd built. That I'd make you see that you were wrong about me. I turned to face them. But you know what I learned instead? My father finally looked up. "I learned that I didn't need you to see it. I needed to see it, and I do." "Natalie," my mother started. "I'll help you," I said. Relief flooded her face. "But not the way you're asking." The relief flickered. I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder I'd been keeping for 3 years. Ever since my company had become profitable, enough that I'd started thinking about what I'd do if this exact moment ever came. Inside was a check. I'd written that morning after Ryan had called to warn me they were coming. I handed it to my father. $15,000. Made out to both of them. That's 3 months of rent, security deposit, and moving costs for a modest apartment. It's also a one-time gift, not a loan. You don't owe it back. My mother stared at the check. But you're not staying here, I continued. And I'm not funding your retirement or paying your bills. What I'm giving you is a bridge. What you build on the other side of it is your responsibility. Why? My father asked, and his voice was hoarse. Why help you? He nodded. Because you're my parents, and because I'm not interested in teaching you a lesson, the way you tried to teach me one. But I'm also not interested in pretending the last 6 years didn't happen. I sat back down. You told me I wasn't worth helping. You told me I needed to hit bottom. You were wrong. What I needed was someone to believe I could get back up. You weren't that person, but other people were. My mother wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, Natalie. I know. I was scared, she said. I was scared you'd waste your life chasing things that would never work out. I thought if we made it hard enough, you'd choose something safer. You didn't make it hard, Mom. You made it clear. That my worth to you was conditional. That love had terms and conditions. That's not... It is. And I've spent 6 years learning to be okay with that. Now you get to decide if you're okay with it too. My father looked at the check in his hand. What do you want from us? Honesty. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with acknowledging what actually happened. Not a story where you were trying to help. The truth. That you were ashamed of me. And you didn't want to be associated with my failure. Silence. Then my father said quietly, You're right. My mother looked at him, shocked. We were ashamed, he continued. We told our friends you were taking time to figure things out. We didn't tell them you'd asked for help and we'd said no. We didn't tell anyone that. He set the check on the coffee table. I don't know if we deserve this. You don't, I said. But I'm giving it to you anyway. Not because you earned it, because I did. And one of the things I earned was the right to decide who I want to be. And I don't want to be someone who turns people away when they're at the bottom. My mother reached for my hand. I let her take it, but I didn't squeeze back. Can we start over? She asked. No, but we can start from here. If you're willing to be honest about where here is, if someone who hurt you showed up asking for help, what would you do? Not what you think you should do. What would you actually do? Drop one word in the comments. Help, refuse, or boundary. I want to know where your heart actually is on this. They took the check. They found a small apartment in Round Rock, 30 minutes north. My father got a job managing a print shop. My mother started working part-time at a library. We have dinner once a month now. It's not comfortable. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes my mother still offers advice I didn't ask for. And I have to remind her that I'm not 26 anymore. But it's honest. Last month, my father said something I didn't expect. We were sitting on my back porch after dinner, watching the sky turn orange. I think about that day a lot, he said. Which day? The day we closed the door. I didn't respond. I told myself we were doing the right thing. That you needed to learn resilience. That helping you would make you weak. And now? Now I think I was terrified of what it said about me if you failed. That I'd raise someone who couldn't make it. That people would look at your failure and see mine. He turned to me. I wasn't protecting you from failure, Natalie. I was protecting myself from embarrassment. And I'm sorry. It wasn't enough to erase 6 years, but it was enough to start building something different. Here's the truth I learned at 32 that I wish I'd known at 26. Your worth isn't determined by whether people choose to see it. It's determined by whether you choose to build it. And boundaries aren't cruelty. They're the terms under which you're willing to let people back in. The suitcase on my porch. The $15,000 check. 6 years between their laughter and their apology. That's my story. Now tell me yours. First, what's the smallest act of help someone gave you when you were at your lowest? 1 sentence. I'll read every single one. Second, if you could go back and tell your younger self one thing about surviving rejection, what would it be?